So, in talking about culture shock, we talk a little bit about this that there are five cultural differences that you may not know exist, but really cause culture shock. Now, I will say these come from my seminary professor, Malcolm Hartnell. He's working as a missionary half the time, teaching at seminary half the time. He works in a closed nation. I can't really talk much about it because this is a publicly available video, but he's doing an awesome work. And so he presented these after many years of research and many years of missionaryism. So here we go. 5 attitudes or differences that cause culture shock. The first one is this idea of individual versus group. We as Americans are used to living in an individualistic society. The whole thing is how do I succeed per se? And I'm going to move that up there to get it out of the way. How do I succeed is all that my value and worth is. So if you get an A or you get a trophy, we are like, woohoo, you're awesome. In most cultures of the world, that's not how they look at things. The whole thing is we accomplish something. We get an A. So if you hate group projects, well, most of the world works on a group project. Most of them are group mindset. If we don't all succeed, then we all fail. It'd be like in my class, if you want to get an A, there's only 2 options. Either everybody in my class gets an A or everybody gets an F. Well, if that were the case, you would work really hard to make sure everybody gets an A. And so most cultures operate like that, where they're actually focused on the group rather than the individual. This hits up a little bit as well is this idea of conformity, where in the United States, you're told, be unique, stand out, dress cool, be awesome, be different. However, in other cultures, if you do that, you're actually shamed and shunned and cast down. Because there's this Hopi proverb, the highest nail gets hit the hardest, right? So the idea is if I'm in another country, my goal is not to stand out, it's to conform to what's going on. So if I go and I share the gospel with someone, I'm like, do you personally want to make a decision? They're going to say no. Not because they don't want to make a decision, but because they don't think or they don't value individually. But if you go to a whole family and say, does your whole family want to believe? They're going to say, yes, I want to believe the gospel. We want to believe. And so while we're so individually focused, this is going to frustrate us because they make group decisions. Rather than I'm just going to say, hey, I'm going to go to the supermarket, it's going to be, hey, does all of my friends want to go to the supermarket? Do we all want to go there? And so most cultures operate, the vast majority operate in this group mentality rather than individual mentality. And so when you're serving as a missionary, you're going to get frustrated because you're going to ask somebody for a decision and they're going to say, well, I don't know. Let me ask my peers. And it's a whole group you need to convince, not just one. The second one is this idea of task versus person. We in America value completing a task. I want you to watch all of these videos, be done. Once you get done, you're done with this course. Yay, right? That's task oriented. Most of the cultures do not prioritize task, they prioritize relationship. Oh, this will frustrate the bejeebies out of you when you're overseas because we just want to go build a wall. But so I'm going to go down there and say, hey, let's go build that wall and start working on it, right? Well, my local friend is going to sit down and we're going to sit with the person who owns the brick lane shop and we're going to spend 1 or 2 days just building a relationship with them before we buy the bricks because they value the relationship more than getting something done. And what I find this over and over again, this is like the number one thing that's frustrated is because you're going to be sitting overseas with a group and you're going to be sitting there and the people are just going to be sitting and having coffee and you're going to be looking around going like, when are we going to go do something? Come on, let's go. Let's get something done. Let's not just sit here. Well, most of the world lives in this idea of relationships are more valuable. Sometimes on a mission trip, the best thing you can do is not actually do anything, but just simply sit with people for hours. And it's going to want you to pull your hair out because you're going to think you did nothing. But if you build relationships, that's way more valuable than actually getting something done. And so the idea is, when you're overseas and you're serving, you're as a missionary, rather than being focused on getting something accomplished, it's building relationships. It's why we try to tailor mission trips this way. Is we want the mission trips to be more focused on building relationships that you build lifelong relationships rather than just building a wall. Because building a wall is good, but they don't value that. They would rather you just sit with coffee and still live in a hut. And that sounds it's so hard for our minds to get a wrap around it. But most of the world operates with relationship is more important than actually accomplishment. The third one is what I would say is the number one thing we see in other countries, cultures, is time versus event. In the United States, we are very time oriented. Be up at this time. My alarm goes off. Get here, get there, bus schedules, dot, 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 dot. That is what our culture probably worships more than money is time and being very structured in our time. And dinner's at this and da, 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 da. Almost nowhere outside of the European Union and America, the United States of America, focuses on time. They focus on events. That's why relationships are kind of the precursor to this, is because they just want to spend time together, relationships building. Not only that, okay, in the United States, if I say church starts at 8, you're going to get in your car, zip down there, and it's easy to get to there by 8. But when I'm in Africa, and I've been in Africa by myself and just traveling, then they say, okay, you've got to get there at 8. You show up at the bus stop. Well, the bus is delayed 1 or 2 or 3 hours. So you show up 3 hours late, and you know what? Nobody cares because, hey, who cares? The bus was late, whatever. And it's why in America, the church services are an hour and 15 long. In Africa, they're 3.5-hour events. You come, you build relationships. It's all about the relationships. And the whole goal is just that you come and go, and the relationship is more important than being on time. This will drive you off the walls overseas, because what you're going to want to do is your host, you're going to say, hey, breakfast is at 8. You're going to be there at 8. Breakfast doesn't show up till 10. You're like, what the heck? I mean, come on. Well, they were like, well, I was walking and I met the dairy farmer and we just chit-chatted for a little while. And then I met the egg farmer and we chit-chatted for a while. And I got here when I got here. See, they're busy building relationships rather than finishing the task of getting breakfast made. And this is probably the one that drives us the most wild as Westerners, because we want things done on time, when most of the world is more focused about just having the event, and you show up, you come, and you leave as you want. And if you can get over this hurdle, you'll do much better overseas. The fourth one is this idea of concealed and exposed vulnerability. You may have not noticed this, but if you ever hear your pastor give a sermon, when they fail, they actually share their failures with people. They say, oh, the other day I got angry and I upset at my brother, my wife, my uncle. And so they just share it. We're transparent with our failures. Other cultures, absolutely not. To share your failure is to just be a horrible reputation ruiner for yourself. You would never share that you failed. So if you fail, you don't reveal it and confess it, you hide it. And again, a group mentality, if one of you messes up, it could bring shame on all of us. So we all hide it. We don't expose it, never expose it and bring shame on our whole family. And you can see why they would hide it in other ones. This is really apparent in many contexts where we as missionaries are going and we're actually sharing our failures with the culture. So if I'm going to get up and share my testimony, I'm going to say, okay, so I was this, I was drunk, I was this, I was that, I was bad. Oh, that just looks bad in those cultures. They don't, then all of a sudden they're not even going to listen to your testimony, because they're like, wow, we can't trust this person. We only trust people that are perfect. And so what you find is a lot of hidden shame and sins go on in other cultures, because the culture says, hide, don't share any failings. Now, this leads to a second point right on it, which is if I'm supposed to never fail or hide all my failings, I'm not going to take risk. See, we're individualists in the United States, and we're transparent with our failures. So we say, just go take risks, go launch into the space, go take a risk. I mean, I've been challenging you to take a risk. But in other cultures, if you risk, you might fail. And if you fail, it brings shame that you have to hide. So therefore, rather than going and risking, you're going to hide. And you're not going to take risks. See, in the United States, we have so much wealth and ability. Like if I'm a farmer and a new company comes and says, here's 10 seeds, try and see which one works best. I'm going to try because I've got insurance. And if one fails, it's okay. I've got things back up. I've got plenty enough. I can afford a risk. But an African farmer, if I say, go try all these 10 seeds, if they don't work, they're dead because their only source of income is that crop. So when I bring something new, they're going to say, I don't want to do it because what if it fails? What if I have to hide? What if I have to, draw back? And so what you find is in other cultures, they're not willing to take a risk. And that is a huge thing, especially when it comes to the gospel. I say, try out Christianity, see if it works. And they're going to say, heck no, I don't want to try it out because I might be wrong. That would be bad. And so I don't want to conceal or hide my sin. And so that's this drawing back happens in many cultures. And then the very last one is this idea of achieved versus ascribed prestige. Big fancy words, okay? Oh, big fancy words. No, big fancy words. Basically, achieved means your value or how awesome you are in America is based off of what you achieve. So if you get your degree, you get your master's, you get your doctorates, we're all going to be like, woo, you rock. Or if you become a celebrity and we'll celebrate you because you've achieved something. And that's what we value in America is achievement. In other cultures, that's not true. In other cultures, what they do is you are valued simply based off of your age or your rank. You didn't have to earn it. You were just simply born into it. It's in like the caste system or in cultures like this, where if you are the governor, we revere you, not because you're awesome, but just because you hold that position. And so what we find in this in our culture is you can be lifted up as a celebrity very quickly, but you can be torn down from it, right? Really quickly. In other cultures, you can be raised up, but once you're there, you can never lose that status, even if you do wrong things, even if you're corrupt and immoral and so forth. And your failures, find out about our failures. We're not going to challenge you again because we're a group. We're thinking like a group. We're going to hide it. And so what you find is that when people in other cultures are at a certain rank or certain age, they're the elders, that is primarily what we listen to. When it comes to sharing the gospel, if I want to convert one person, I can't convert that person. I have to convert the elder. And when the elder finally converts, then the whole community will convert. But the way to a person's heart is through the community elder, because that person has the prestige that's been given to them as an elder. Even if they're immoral and corrupt and they're doing bad things, because they hold that position, people trust them. And that's what's really difficult when we go to share the gospel in other cultures or so forth, is because I need to not convert one individual. I need to convert whole tribes by going to the elders. And elders do not typically trust quickly. And so rather than trying to get the task accomplished, I have to build relationships, which sometimes take years or decades before they're ready to convert. And that's another thing is so we're going to be frustrated with a tribe when this happens. So these are 5 different attitudes: individual versus group. We think individual, most people think group. Task versus person or relationship. So we think get the task accomplished. Most people think build a relationship. We think time's important. Other people say no, just the relationship and the event is important. One says be vulnerable, take risks, and admit your failures. The other one says don't take risks, hide your failures, and just stay safe. And the last one is we say just go hard and you'll receive praise. And the other one says I give praise only to those who have the role given to them by society. All of these combined together cause total culture shock when you're overseas. And if you've ever done a mission trip, I guarantee you've ran into at least one of these, if not 2 or 3 of them, because anytime you're overseas, the culture is different. They value these differently, and you've seen them. If you're aware of them, they make it so much more enjoyable to do a mission trip, because then when all of a sudden you're sitting there thinking, what are we doing here? Why are we listening to this old man talk? Well, it's because he's the elder and we're trying to get permission to help them. And all of a sudden you can sit there and recognize, okay, though this not what I want to do. This is what we need to do at the moment. And you can relax and enjoy it rather than being focused on your worldview. So what people do in other cultures isn't wrong. It's just different than ours. And in fact, I think we have a lot to learn from these other cultures about relationships and valuing one another that they could really teach the American, or the United States culture. So chapter 3, packed with information, have a lot of information to go through. We're going to move on to chapter 4 and following here in the next few videos.